Hello everybody, welcome back to the Ocean Mystery Iceberg. If you're wondering what the Ocean Mystery Iceberg is, it's this chart that me and my wife made. On the top you have more well-known things about the ocean that are mysterious, and as you get further down, there's more strange and obscure things that you probably haven't heard about. But it's really interesting. We spent a lot of time making this series, and we're really excited for the second part that we're doing right now. But before I get into it, I just want to say thank you guys so much for all your support. I just got my YouTube plaque in the mail the other day. And it's just really surreal. I didn't think I'd ever make it here. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much. You've been such a blessing to me and to my wife. But thank you guys. Like I said at the beginning of the other video, the ocean is so massive. 71% of the Earth is covered by the ocean, and 80% of the ocean has never been mapped. So there's a lot of mysterious areas that we've never seen before. And scientists believe that nearly 90% of the species in the oceans have still never been discovered, which is mind-boggling. So let's go ahead and get into the fourth tier. Alright, on the top of tier 4 we have the Yonaguni Monument. So this is like Japan's Atlantis. The Yonaguni Monument is what many believe to be a giant human-built pyramid that's underneath the ocean. It's this enormous underwater rock formation that covers almost 200 feet, and it's located just off the coast of Yonaguni-jima, which is an island that lies 75 miles off the coast of Taiwan. It's speculated to have existed for more than 10,000 years. Now, while some believe this was built by an advanced prehistoric society, others debate whether its formation was completely man-made or entirely natural. However, what's really strange about it is there's really intricate carvings of animals and stairs and other formations in it. It was first discovered in the mid-1980s by a scuba diver who was looking for hammerhead sharks. There's these really human-looking made pyramid structures that bear evidence of a lost civilization potentially, which in this area there's believed to be something called the lost continent of Mu, which is sort of like Japanese Atlantis. In the structure, many have identified there being like a pyramid, this castle, roads, pool, and a stadium, and several really artificial looking things that support the theory, like a whole bunch of right angles, it looks like tools carved it, retaining walls, something that looks like a road, drainage canals, gates, stairways, and 2 carved monuments that are shaped like turtles. So with all this evidence, it's really hard to believe that this occurred naturally. It really looks like it was created by man, so it's pretty crazy and you should look more into it. Moving on to the 2003 Great White Incident. So the 2003 Great White Incident was this situation where this 9-foot great white shark was tagged off the coast of Australia. The shark was tagged with this tag that was just set to record the temperatures and depths of the shark, and the data that this tag showed 4 months later was absolutely insane. It essentially seems that the shark was both eaten and dragged down to the ocean floor. So what happened was the female great white shark dove to the depths of about 1,903 feet. The temperature surrounding the tag spiked from 46 degrees to 78 right whenever it got to the bottom, suggesting that it was eaten by something that we don't know. Researchers guess that a large animal came up from underneath the shark and grabbed it and dragged it to the bottom, where the shark was then swallowed, causing the dramatic dive and then the 32-degree temperature spike. So a lot of people speculated that this animal that grabbed the shark was like a large great white or perhaps an orca. However, it wouldn't make sense because the internal temperatures of great white sharks are between 65 to 70 degrees. And the orca's internal temperatures are 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so it doesn't line up with the 78 degrees that the tag jumped to. And despite everybody looking into this, researchers are still not sure what ate the shark. It maybe could have been something a bit more horrifying than we think. A giant squid or a megalodon. Probably the Kraken, in my opinion. But whatever it is, it was large enough to take on a 9-foot great white shark and drag it all the way to the bottom and, not be an orca or a great white. So, truly insane. Moving on. The biblical Leviathan. So to start off with, every religion throughout the world, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, they all have a story that involves a giant Leviathan sea monster that lurks in the depths of the ocean. I'm going to be focusing on the creature that was mentioned in the Old Testament of the Bible. Now, I'm not going to read all the passages, but like Job 3:8, Job 41:12, Isaiah 12:1, or Isaiah 27:1, they all talk about this massive monster called the Leviathan. It's like this creature that was said to cause infliction on humanity. From the passages I mentioned, we can gather that the Leviathan lived in the sea or a big body of water and was a creature to be reckoned with. It appears to be large in size, have plated armor, sharp teeth, and the ability to spit fire from its mouth. Essentially, the Leviathan had the skin of a dragon without any weak spots. It had sharp teeth, could breathe fire like I just said. His breath alone was described to be able to kindle coals, and his nostrils emitted smoke. The sea even boiled around him as he traveled through the water. So could this be an ancient sea monster, sea serpent? Plesiosaur? Mosasaur? Some say it was 300 miles long, but I couldn't find a description on where it said that anywhere. But essentially, I think it's supposed to represent the enemies of Israel who were then slain by God. It's like a metaphor for that. Or it might just be a real sea monster. Anyways, next on the list I have Kraken Is Real. Oh, look, there's a kitty. The kitty's getting in my shot. So, to start off with, we just don't know very much about the ocean. We didn't even capture a giant squid until 2006. That was just like 15 years ago. That was really recent. 17? It was really recent, guys, come on. So I personally think that there are giant squids large enough to be real-life krakens. I mean, we just haven't seen so much stuff. The giant squids are like these mysterious deep-sea predators that live at the depths of like 2,900 feet below the ocean's surface. They seem to prefer cold temperatures of the far north or the far south of our oceans. And they've only been filmed in their natural environments twice ever. So if we've only filmed these things twice, then imagine what we have never seen. The biggest giant squid ever found was 43 feet long, which included its tentacles, which that's about the size of a semi-truck trailer. However, scientists estimate that the species may be able to grow up to 66 feet long based on the size of a giant squid beak that was found in the stomach of sperm whales, which they prey on giant squids, which is pretty crazy to think about. That's all according to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. But just think about how massive the ocean is and all the species we haven't discovered. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot larger ones that we've never found. All the stuff that sinks to the bottom, and all the deep sea giganticism, all those creatures that get massive because of the depths of the sea. I mean, that is just insane in general. I don't think I added that to the iceberg, but like, deep sea giganticism? So crazy. You would think that the immense pressure of the ocean would make something grow smaller, but what it does is make it grow larger so it can go further because it's such massive spaces in the ocean. So perhaps the Norse legend surrounding the Kraken derived from the giant squid. That's pretty much the idea of that on there. Alright, moving on to Globster. So a Globster, also referred to as blobs, is an undefined organic mass that washes up on shorelines. They're characterized as being really hard to identify, at least by initial untrained eyes, and creating controversy over their identity. Most of the time they have no visible eyes, no defined head, and no apparent bone structure. But later on in just a second we're about to talk about a couple of the most well-known Globsters, so I'll get into that in just a second. The German U-boat 60-foot crocodile. Okay, so bear with me here. In 1915, during World War I, a German U-boat identified as the U-28 torpedoed and sank a British steamer called the SS Iberian. The Iberian sank stern first, and the bow aimed directly upwards, and after about 25 seconds underwater, there was another very large explosion, which was most likely the Iberian's boilers exploding. During this second explosion, the U-28 crew said that they saw something odd. The commander said the wreckage remained beneath the water for approximately 25 seconds at the depth that remains clearly impossible to assess, when suddenly there was a violent explosion which shot pieces of debris, among them a gigantic aquatic creature out of the water to a height of approximately 80 feet. The commander, along with 6 crew members, saw a creature that they described as being a giant aquatic crocodile. They said it was about 60 feet long, with 4 limbs resembling large webbed feet, and having a large pointed tail and a head that tapered to a point, kind of like a crocodile. They couldn't get a picture because it sank within seconds. A lot of people don't believe this account because the 61 survivors of the SS Iberian didn't report the creature, or maybe they didn't think it was important. However, others note this as a credible source, and the clarity of the description is really good. So they say this could be like a sea serpent, but who knows? And you know, in the middle of the ocean, there's no way it could be a regular crocodile. So, really strange. Alright, tier 5. First up, we have the Sargasso Sea's carnivorous seaweed. The Sargasso Sea is a really weird thing. It's this shoreless oval of water in the North Atlantic that measures about 2,000 miles wide. It is the only sea in the world not bound by land. It's bounded by all ocean currents on all sides, and the water rotates clockwise, revolving slowly like the eye of a hurricane. What's really crazy about the Sargasso Sea is that it's 6 feet higher than the rest of the ocean, which is crazy to think about. The area has struck terror into the minds of sailors for centuries. It was once known as the Horse Latitudes after Spanish ships were forced to throw their horses overboard to save drinking water because they didn't have any wind and they got stuck there. According to old folklore, stories of carnivorous seaweed in the Sargasso Sea were responsible for numbers of crews disappearing in the 1800s. This body of water is well known for the massive accumulations of sargassum, which is a certain dense type of brown seaweed that is massive. A number of empty ships have been found sailing through its waters with the crews just completely gone without a trace, like the Mary Celeste, I talked about that earlier. But it's crazy to think that, like, if people fell in the water that this seaweed could, like, overcome them and eat them. I know we don't really have any proof of that, but, I mean, we have no idea where the crew went, unless they just all sunk, or were eaten by something else. But despite its fearsome reputation, this sea plays a really vital role in the North Atlantic ecosystem. It's referred to as the golden rainforest of the ocean. Young sea turtles shelter in the thick mat of vegetation, and most of the world's freshwater eels are actually spawned here, which is an even bigger mystery that we will get into later, because all these eels spawn here and we have no idea how it works. We've never found their eggs. We don't know how they reproduce. It's really strange. We'll get into that later. Alright, vertical migration. This is a good one. So vertical migration is the idea that, like, sea monsters and creatures mentioned throughout history that we don't think are real, but we don't see them because they literally migrate vertically or have plunged deeper into the depths of the ocean. So as more traffic crosses over the ocean, giant sea creatures like the Megalodon or the Kraken or other sea serpent-like things just go deeper. And they go where we're highly unlikely to see them due to darkness and pressure and just the sheer massiveness of the depths of the ocean. Which, I mean, other sea creatures are known to do this whenever there's more traffic, like squids and stuff. They migrate down whenever there's increased stuff moving over top of them. But we really haven't seen the colossal squid do this just because we haven't, seen them in the wild, like hardly at all. But, if they do that, then I would imagine that the even larger ones would do the same thing. So, it's crazy to think about. Moving on to the Mariana Trench. I'm sure most of you guys know about this one. It's located between Guam, the Philippines, and the Pacific Ocean. The Mariana Trench is the deepest oceanic region on the planet and also contains the lowest accessible point on Earth because, there's possibly deeper points that we haven't seen that just aren't accessible, but that's a whole nother thing. It's over 36,000 feet below sea level, is 1,500 miles long, and stretches about 43 miles wide. To put that into perspective, the deepest point, the Challenger Deep, is thousands of feet deeper than Mount Everest is high. Commercial airliners actually fly at a lower altitude than that is deep. So just think about this. If you look up into the sky and you see a plane flying way above you, like at the maximum altitude that they fly, just think about being at the bottom of the ocean and looking at that plane. That would be like a boat sitting at the top of the ocean. Except add a few more thousand feet and then that would be it. The Mariana snailfish was recently discovered lurking at the depths of 26,000 feet, and it's the deepest fish ever discovered on record. It's able to withstand the pressure of like 1,600 elephants standing on the roof of a car, so who knows what else could be down there. There's a lot of slugs, a lot of squids, but not very many fish whenever you get that deep. Only a few people have ever been down in the trench. The first 2 men were in 1960. Their descent took 5 hours, and they only stayed at the bottom for about 25 minutes. It wasn't until 2012 when someone dared to go back, and that person actually happened to be James Cameron, the guy who made the Avatar movies. And the movie The Abyss, that's a good one. If you like this series, watch The Abyss, that's a great movie that he made. It's honestly really underrated. Anyways, since 2019, recently, there's been 25 people that have actually braved the Mariana Trench, going down in a vessel called the Limiting Factor. It's this $37 million two-seater submersible submarine that's like by a private company, and like a bunch of rich people probably do it. I would love to do it, but that's going to take a few years or decades. Underground ocean. So according to some scientists, there's this underwater ocean that's believed to be 3 times as large as our other oceans combined. But it's not like the oceans that we think about. Using seismograph, these scientists have concluded that there's about 400 miles below the Earth's surface, in the transitional zone, there's this material called ringwoodite, which is this spongy-like material that's actually attracting hydrogen and holding the water together in like this molecular structure. I actually talked about this on Facebook in a Facebook video about the ocean, and they fact-checked me. They're like, no, that's not real. These scientists also suggest the water seeped out of Earth rather than the traditional scientific theory that the Earth gained water by icy comets colliding with Earth. However, a lot of this is speculation because we've only found one piece of ringwoodite ever, which arrived on the surface from a volcano in Brazil. But I still think it's cool to think that we potentially have like a massive ocean beneath the Earth. Kind of like in the movie Journey to the Center of the Earth. They have a giant ocean in that one. Heracleion, also known as Underwater Egypt. So, ancient Egypt has this lost city called Heracleion, also known as Thanos back in the day. Not Thanos, Thanos. It's perhaps the greatest submerged city ever discovered, and we're only just learning more about it because it was really recently discovered. So for centuries, everybody thought that this Greek historian named Herodotus just made up the existence of Heracleion, which is really funny because we just recently discovered it. It's believed to have been one of Egypt's greatest ports. Heracleion was believed to have collapsed into the Mediterranean after the 2nd century BC, or about 3,200 years ago. It's located 1.6 miles off the coast of Egypt in the Mediterranean Sea, under about 30 feet of water, which is 20 miles from Alexandria. The ruins of the city were discovered in 1999, but excavations are ongoing, and every year we learn more and more and discover more. But this ancient city has just been, lost underneath these waves for thousands of years, and it's just crazy to think that was just lying right down there and we didn't even know. For centuries, everybody believed this was a myth, just like the city of Atlantis is viewed today. The mention of Heracleion only appeared in a few rare ancient texts that most historians really didn't bother looking at. But over time, the central island was built on this soil that liquefied, and it weakened from like earthquakes and tsunamis and rising sea levels to the point that everything became liquid and the buildings and everything just collapsed about 3,000 years ago. Alright, moving on to Tier 6. Alright guys, I know you guys watched the Mermaid Documentary. Don't lie. If you guys like my stuff, then you've probably seen the documentary, or you would like the documentary. But it was called Mermaids, The Body Found, and there was another one called Mermaids, The New Evidence. It was a series by Animal Planet that aired in 2012 and 2013. Mermaids, The New Evidence at the time was like the most successful show in Animal Planet history. The concept of the show was that mermaids were real and that the scientists of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration were just hiding all the existence from the world. Animal Planet at the time had only been like showing real footage and factual information, and almost everybody that watched this, I feel like, thought it was real. But it was actually a mockumentary that they aired with like no disclaimer. I remember I was in my grandma's house, and I think we watched that, and we all thought, me and my brother and sister all thought it was real. But I'm sure you guys probably did too, because it was so strange. I saw a bunch of videos, people talking about the same thing. They all thought it was real. I was like, no way, mermaids! But legends of mermaids go back thousands of years to Babylon, and stories can be found all over the world. But there's a lot of alleged remains of mermaids being found, like in Japan, in Fukuoka, Japan. They said they found mermaids that washed ashore in 1222. The bones have been on display for 800 years, but have never been scientifically tested, so their origins are unknown. But even today, footage pops up everywhere of alleged mermaids washing up on shore, but almost everything has been a hoax. A lot of people think that manatees are the original mermaids, all the tales of them. And if you look at it the angle right, they do kind of look mermaidy. We saw manatees the other day. It was really cool. Moving on to the sinking of the Titanic. So you guys all know the story of the Titanic. It sank in 1912, the North Atlantic Ocean. 4 days into the voyage to New York City, it hit a big iceberg. 2,000 people on board, 1,500 people died. It was the deadliest peacetime marine disaster ever in history. But there's a theory that suggests it didn't sink. The Titanic didn't sink. So the Titanic had a sister ship called the Olympic, and people think that it was disguised as the Titanic as an insurance scam by the owners. The owners of the ship was the International Mercantile Marine Group, which was controlled by an American banker named J.P. Morgan. So the sister ship of the Titanic was damaged, and J.P. Morgan didn't want to deal with fixing it, so he just replaced the Titanic with it and killed so many people. This is just a theory. It's pretty much been disproven. The Titanic's original building material was labeled 401, and the Olympics was labeled 400, and the only material pulled up from the Titanic is labeled 401, so. But there's another really cool theory that I like concerning J.P. Morgan, and it claims that, J.P. Morgan wanted to create the first U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, which I probably shouldn't say on YouTube, but I'm going to say it anyways, oh well. And he had a whole bunch of rivals that didn't want this Federal Reserve to exist. And so, all the millionaires that were against him, John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, all three rivals were on board the Titanic. And so, the idea is that JP Morgan was like, they're going to stop me from making this Federal Reserve, may as well sink the entire ship, and that's what he did, but it's just an idea. There's no solid evidence on this. But all three of those millionaires did die on the ship, so... Alright, moving on to the Montauk Monster. This is probably one of the most famous globsters. It washed up on the shores of Montauk, New York in 2008. The body was said to have really strange features. It was stout, hairless, had claws, and like a beak, which was really strange. But it mysteriously disappeared, and we're still not sure what the creature was. A lot of people thought that the creature was either like a raccoon, or a sheep, or a dog, or like a turtle with no shell. However, the Marine Institute at Stonebrook University, that was close, disproved them all being one of these animals. However, there's one option that they couldn't disprove, and that is that this animal was some sort of genetically modified creature that escaped from a nearby government lab. Which sounds crazy until you look at how this beach that this animal washed up at was literally only 15 miles away from the Plum Island Animal Disease Center. And it's directly across the harbor, so it makes sense that this thing washed up over here, especially since there was a whole bunch of various other strange animals washing up in the same area that people didn't know what they were. So, you know, maybe the Montauk Monster was that, but it's hard to get solid evidence on this stuff, so moving on. Aquatic Ape Theory. I'm not going to get too far into this. In 1960, a marine biologist named Alistair Hardy introduced the aquatic ape theory that states that, like, our ancestors once spent a whole bunch of time in water, and that a bunch of characteristics of humans are marked out different from other apes because they had adaptations to spending time in water. Basically, the idea is that the features that humans have, like our swimming ability, loss of body hair, the curving of our body, the reduced resistance of water, a layer of fat underneath our skin, and then like our babies being able to hold their breath underwater as soon as they're born. It all suggests that maybe our ability to walk upright may have developed through wading through water, and that basically we evolved from water monkeys. Anyways, this theory has a lot of pushback in the scientific community. Moving on, St. Augustine Monster. The St. Augustine Monster was a name given to a large carcass which was originally thought to be the remains of a gigantic octopus that washed ashore on the United States coast near St. Augustine, Florida in 1896. It was one of the earliest recorded examples of a globster ever. The carcass was very pale pink, almost white in color. It was composed of a rubbery substance. It was very hard consistency, and it was really hard to cut this thing. They couldn't hardly cut through it. The part of the carcass that was visible measured 18 feet in length, 7 feet in width, so it was huge. It weighed like 5 tons, if not more. And it was also swept back into the sea for a while, for like a few days during a storm, but it resurfaced, and they're like, we gotta get this thing back on shore so we can use it as a dead animal tourist attraction. So with the help of 6 horses and a bunch of men, they ended up moving it several miles closer inland, where it was protected from the tide. But the carcass did become like a tourist attraction, and it was visited by a ton of people, and it's unknown what happened to the carcass afterwards. But in 1995, an analysis concluded that the St. Augustine Monster was probably like a large, massive whale blubber, likely like a sperm whale. So no huge mystery there, but it's still pretty interesting that it became like a huge tourist attraction. Everybody thought that this massive flesh was like a monster, and they all came and saw it. Just cool to think about. Anyways, that's the end of tier 6. We only have 2 tiers left? Yes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the 100,000 subs. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Sorry it took so long to make this video. It's just a lot of traveling. We're traveling a lot. I just went to New York for business, which is really weird to say. But I'm hoping to make some really good and high quality content. More like this stuff, more about like mysteries and other cool things that you find interesting. But if you have any input on the video, put it in the comments. If you have an idea for like the next video to make, put that in the comments and I will definitely be reading it. But, you know, the ocean's so mysterious. We're about to go to the West Coast and go see the ocean over there here in a few weeks. So we're really excited about that. Thank you to my wonderful wife, Lindsay, for helping with all this information and all this research. She does such a wonderful job. But just thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. Over and out.